We've been talking about trauma and its effects. Over the weeks, we've been talking about how trauma can create shame, guilt in our life, addictions, grief. And tonight, we're going to take all of that toxicity and make it into a purposeful now. I'm Roy Burley.
And I'm Esther Branco Diaz, and this is part 5 in how to turn a toxic past into a purposeful now. Good evening. Welcome to Trust Talks by the Pure in Trust. It's great if you're joining us now on the live on Facebook and YouTube, or if you're watching this later on, then we say welcome. It's good to have you with us. How are you doing, Roy?
Wonderful. Wasn't it a glorious day today?
It was beautiful to see the sunshine. We had quite a bit of rain actually over here. Did you?
No, we just had pure sunshine, not to boast or show off all day long. Really enjoyed it.
We should have been over there in the west, because over here in the east it wasn't quite like that. But it's been a good day, and I look forward to Thursdays actually, even though what we're talking about is often some really challenging things. It's great to be able to join with other people who are watching, and you, Roy, have a little chin wag. So tonight, as Roy said, we've been looking at the last few weeks the effects of trauma, discussing shame, guilt, addictions, grief, some really sensitive issues, difficult subjects. But tonight we get to the how-to part of our title, of how to turn a toxic past into a purposeful now. So we're going to be going through some things that have really helped us over the years, and some techniques that we're going to share that hopefully will help you as well. So I wonder if I could just ask you a favor, first of all, if you're watching, if you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, could you? Because it really helps YouTube know that people want some positive content on there. And it'll help us to know as well that you like what we're doing and you can relate to it. So also, if you're watching, give us a wave, let us know that you're there. Because we're live streaming on Facebook and YouTube at the same time, we can't see who's there unless you give us a wave or say hi. So we'd love to know who's there, who's with us on this journey. Have you seen any of the other episodes? Because we would love to hear what you've got to say about that. Hi, Aaron. Thanks for giving us the wave. That's really funny, actually, because Aaron wrote from Zeffy. He hosts this for us. He makes the technology happen. This is supported by Zeffy. So thank you, Zeffy. We'll give you a little shout out because you're really making this happen for us. And hi, Beverly.
Hey, Bev.
Over in South Africa. It's always great when you join us, Bev. You bring a lot to what we share. So make sure you send us your comments. What I would say is, if you haven't seen any of the other episodes, maybe give them a watch, because what we're talking about tonight really follows on. We've been following a process out of trauma, really, the things, the effects that come from trauma. And tonight we're moving into what you can do with all of that stuff. So if you've not seen those episodes, it might be worth watching them. You can always come back to this. And let's say hello to, hey, Nicola. Good to have you with us. And hi, Lee, over in Wales.
Lee.
Have you had any sunshine in Wales today, Lee? That would be a good question. And hi, Linz. Hi, Lindsay. She says, hi, Esther and Roy. Good to see you and hear you. It's great to have you with us. And hi, Syrian. Thank you for giving us a shout out.
Good to
For those
see
of
you,
you who are watching
Julian.
this later on, then we're just commenting on some of the people saying hello on YouTube and Facebook. So
I
great.
thought they'd all just be still out in the sun because it's still nice in their gardens, but they've made a sacrifice to be with us.
Yeah.
Well
It
done, guys.
is a very sunny day in Wales, which is something, isn't it? So we definitely should have been in the West today. Good to hear, Lee. I'm glad that's where the sun was. So for those of you who've been on this journey with us, or any of you who are struggling right now, I believe that some of the things that we're going to share tonight are going to help you to know that there is hope, and there's hope for a life of purpose right now, not next year, not in 5 years' time, right now. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, aren't we, Roy?
Yes, definitely.
And Nikki is saying actually it was extremely hot in Warsaw today. Ha ha ha. We think she might be joking, but good to have you with us, Nikki. Yes. So, Roy, you're going to be sharing some stuff with us, particularly tonight, aren't you?
Yeah. So, and I think we'll come to that. I'm going to try and actually demonstrate how we do this, and maybe just look at a couple of important routes along the journey that I think, unless we tackle these root things, that it's very difficult to progress and go forward. So so maybe I could pick on you again, Esther. And but just before I do, I'm just going to give you a second to breathe. I just wanted to say this because obviously this is Trust Talks is brought to us by the Purim Trust, and we were with our board last night, and the feedback was so encouraging. Like, I could see a tear come into your eyes a few times on how important the board felt that this is, and I felt very affirmed last night. And I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, it was really encouraging because this is quite different for what we do as a charity, supporting children in the Philippines. So, but it's all with the same purpose in a way, isn't it, Roy, of helping to build hope for those who need it.
Yeah,
but it's
definitely.
really important their support. Yes.
Yeah. So Esther, let's jump in. What has helped you on this journey in overcoming the traumatic experiences in your life?
Yeah, I think as we've shared in previous weeks, we've both been through some stuff in life, haven't we? For those who haven't seen any of those episodes yet, we've been through the things that we've been talking about, haven't we? Shame, guilt, trauma, addictions. So in the process of those things, before I had professional counselling to help me deal with trauma. And the counselling that I had was actually through the judicial system while I was going through a court case to do with abuse that I discussed previously. But I actually found it really unhelpful because it meant going through specific things that had happened to me in great detail. And I felt like I was then reliving the trauma at an already traumatic time of, going through a court case. So much so, actually, that I vowed that I would never have professional counselling again. It really upset me. It enhanced the shame, the guilt, made me relive some traumatic things, I felt like. So for me, that wasn't beneficial. And so I carried on in life vowing never to have counselling, which makes you very locked up and isolated. It's an even more lonely experience then, because you're believing initially that this thing's going to help me. And actually then it just made me feel it made me feel worse. And the reason I vowed not to have counselling is because I didn't ever want to have to verbalise in detail things that had happened to me ever again. Other things that I've tried are sort of repetitive, positive thinking, making declarations over myself, repeating scripture, which in themselves are very good things. You know, I'm not dismissing them. But when you have some deep-rooted fundamental beliefs about yourself, these repetitive things were not reaching my heart. So they were very good in my head, but they weren't affecting these deep roots of shame and guilt and the things that we've spoken about. Whereas what I found with you, Roy, because you were already doing these things, you already had a ministry of helping people and working one-to-one with people and using some of these techniques. What I found beneficial most of all is you helped a lot of freedom and peace to occur within me without having to mention and describe in great detail the things that had happened to me. So you'd look at effects that were happening in my life, and you would get me to share about the effects of these experiences, which was a completely different experience. And from looking at those effects, we were also able to get to the root of the problem without laying myself wide open, bearing my everything, my soul, my worst nightmares and memories and fears. It was a much more gentle process. And from that came an even greater freedom.
Yeah. Can I jump in there, Esther, just to say
Yeah.
what we're not saying? You know, we're not here trying to critique or criticize counseling or anything else like that. You're giving your experience. This is your
Yeah.
experience of counseling, and so it's valid. So
Yeah.
we're not trying to we need to say what we're not saying. So we're not trying to discredit counseling and all the rest of it. And
Definitely.
we're not saying that, you know, don't repeat scriptures, but something else needed to happen for those scriptures really to work. They weren't working for you, and there was a reason for that. So let's be clear about what we're not saying, so people don't get the
Definitely.
wrong end of the stick. But
Yeah.
the point you're making here is this method we used was dealing with the experience, the effects. What did it make us feel? What did it cause our minds and our bodies to think and feel? And without going into the story of it. And oftentimes that can feel so terrible, because we think we're not going to be able to face this, because when we first faced it, we were kids. Often we were children, or we weren't in an emotional place to deal with it. So we had to create a defense mechanism and block it or distract it or something. But now we're adults. Now the method we're using, we're saying, listen, we're going to face it. We're not going to go into details, but we're going to face its effects in your body. We're going to allow it to be, and we're going to know this. It's not going to kill you. You can do this. So, yeah, so, sorry, carry on, Esther. Just clarifying a few things as we go.
Definitely, that's really important to clarify. This is my story and not necessarily advice for everyone to avoid those things. But things that I found really helpful, like I said, where you look at the effects of these things in my life. But I'll give you an example. I can remember a few years ago, you were living in Cambridge, Roy, and I'm in Bury St Edmunds, and I used to come over every Monday night, and we'd go out into Cambridge and we'd feed the poor, the homeless, sorry, and take them socks and gloves and rolls and stuff, and we'd just wander around, wouldn't we, and see who we can meet. And in those evenings, we had some amazing conversations. But interestingly, I was struggling with a shoulder injury. I was a sports massage therapist, had this repetitive injury going on, lots of time off work. And you said to me one day, actually, Esther, I've been thinking about this and I've been praying about you. And I was feeling like, and I'm not sure if this is right or not, so just ignore it if it's not right. But the feeling I had was maybe your heart condemns you. And I can remember it was like a floodgate opening in me. It was like you spoke into something that I was troubling me at that time. And at that time, I would go to bed every night, and before I would close my eyes to sleep, I would pray, dear God, make me a different person. When I wake up in the morning, I want to be a different person. I was so consumed with self-loathing. And I honestly thought that that was humility. I thought that that was me just being humble. I now realize that's actually something completely different. And I would just struggle all the time with, I'm useless, I'm worthless, I'm rubbish. And what you spoke to me at that time was like hitting a nail on the head. And some of that was real discernment. And from a faith perspective, that really comes from God speaking speaking to you. But from that, we had conversations of me just opening up a little bit and sharing, this is what I felt about myself. And to cut a long story short, we were then able to look at, or what I think you could identify, then these effects in my life were pointing to a root. And that root was just, I had never forgiven myself for things that had happened to me when I was a little girl. Now, that sounds very odd, but I was programmed to believe that I was worth abuse, that I was evil, I was wrong, I needed punishing. And I carried on in life believing that I was terrible. And that this little girl in some way was to blame for being abused. And this little girl in some way ruined my life. Sounds very strange now, but I'd been in this position for my whole life. And you were able to help me just look at those feelings, look at those thoughts I had about this little girl, look at this hatred of this little girl, and how the perspective actually was totally not the right perspective, and was able to forgive her.
Yeah.
Which sounds strange, I know, but these were big, big things in my life.
Yeah, this is when things started to change, I would say. And I think one of the roots here that I think is important to address before we even look at techniques is unforgiveness. Now, the unforgiveness is created by a judgment, basically. If you judge, you don't forgive. And you was judging yourself. But what we did is you looked at yourself from an adult's perspective and looked at the little girl. And I said to you, Esther, would you judge that little 10-year-old girl and be so harsh with her if she came to you now? And you said, no, 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 I would never do that. And you began to see the judgment against yourself, and where this judgment is unforgiveness. And there was hatred. There was a hatred, a self-hatred. And so you began to, which wasn't even easy for you. I remember this was quite hard to forgive yourself, was so hard.
Mm. Yeah, and there's that moment where I think you sort of ask the question, are you ready to forgive that little girl? Because you realize that she wasn't to blame, and yet it was still an obstacle. There was a resistance there initially to forgive her. But from that comes great release.
What was the difference after that, Esther?
I think I could, even straight away, I could view myself differently. I could view that little girl, my younger self, differently. It was almost like some blinkers were lifted. What I will say is it's not necessarily fixed once. It's something that I have to revisit, and be aware of how I'm thinking about myself and how I'm feeling about myself. And like we've said before, I haven't mastered that. It's an ongoing process. But the awareness of it, the awareness of the feeling that I have towards my younger self, the awareness of unforgiveness that can rise up there, is freeing in itself. Because,
Yeah.
like we said before, these things that you're too scared to look at, the things that you think that if you look at, it's going to be the end of everything, you won't be able to cope.
Mm.
Um, it's actually, in my experience, the opposite of that occurs. There's freedom in it. It's not so bad after all. It loses its power.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Esther, one of the things I wanted to ask about is, or to talk about a bit, is you was able to actually forgive your stepbrother for what he did to you. I mean, that's quite tremendous, really.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, I just want to reiterate this point of forgiveness is the key to all of it, isn't it? And
Yeah.
me, interestingly, for those who haven't watched before, I was sexually abused for the first few years of my life, by my stepbrother. And the fairly interesting thing is, I found it easier to forgive him for the things that he did to me than I did to forgive myself. Um, but again, sometimes it can creep up and I have to forgive him again. But I feel I am in a place of forgiveness towards him, which wasn't an easy task,
Yeah.
because forgiveness never is, whatever whatever's happened. But I feel I have done that.
Yeah. Which is quite amazing, really. And so let me just take it one step further with forgiveness. I mean, because this is, I mean, it's going to be hard for anyone watching, especially who has suffered abuse. They're going to be like, no, no, I'm not forgiving. And
Yeah.
we understand that, we understand that this is not a this is not a human possibility at this level of offense. This isn't like someone stepping on your toe. This is someone ruining your life.
Hmm.
And that's no, you humanly do not have the capacity to let that go. So there's definitely something, I believe it must come from a greater force within you, within the spirit of God that's in you, to be able to do this. Would you agree with that, Esther?
Definitely. There's something in the human, whether it's human nature, I don't know what it is, but the struggle, as far as I've experienced, is that if I forgive this person, it's like saying that what they did is okay.
Mm.
It's like saying that I condone what you've done, and that's the big struggle. The biggest struggle in my heart, anyway. I can't speak for everyone. Is if I if I let them go and if I just say I forgive you, it's as if I'm saying that what you did is all right.
Yeah.
But it's not that. It isn't that at all. But I think it's one of the biggest struggles in life, I would think, is forgiveness.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of times what happens with Christians in particular, because Christians know they need to forgive, they just do that on a superficial level. But when I talk and I go deep with Christians, they quickly realize that at their heart levels they hate, and if they had the opportunity, they would kill if they
Yeah,
could get away with it. That's how much hatred's in their heart. But if you
yeah,
say, "Have you forgiven?" they say yes. But when I work with them on a one-to-one, they clearly see. I say, "Can you see? You want to murder?" And they say, "Yeah." So
yeah.
it's not. So forgiveness is a very deep thing. But what must never happen is we don't deal with it superficially, because then you're not facing what's really happened. And what we would do, Esther, would face the offense, the debt. That's what it says. Forgive us our debts. There was a debt incurred, a massive debt.
Mm.
And do you remember, we would sit down and we would speak it out and even say, the person, you have done this, and this has made me feel like this, and this has
Yeah.
affected me in this way. Do you remember? And all of that. So we began to face and release and recognize the offense.
Yeah.
Look at it.
Yeah. Because, like you said, forgiveness is something that's easy to say with your mouth, but it's actually something that happens in your heart. And you can think in your head that you've forgiven, but your heart is still locked up, locked that person up, locked that event up, and does not naturally, like you said, want to let it go. But
Yeah.
those moments actually were so powerful in my life of, okay, let's have a conversation with your stepbrother. Like, imagine that you're speaking to him, and I want you to tell him how he made you feel. And it's extremely difficult, but once you start, it's amazing the stuff that comes out of your mouth, things that I didn't even really know because I'd never looked at it properly, you know, even more stuff than you would imagine. And the power in speaking it out, that this is how you made me feel, and then verbalizing that you forgive them, which which is the harder bit.
Yeah. And often having to call on grace, call on the Christ to release forgiveness and to come in line. You see, in a way, you're coming in agreement with the Christ in you, the God essence in you, the Christ that was hanging on the cross after they brutalized him.
Mm.
And he's saying, Father, forgive them, because they really don't know what they're doing. And to come to that level where, I mean, he was forgiving mankind, he was forgiving everyone. He was forgiving the vilest offender. Now, we're not going to be able to deal with that in our human level. We don't forgive. Like, our society will not forgive that. That's the unforgivable sin. You don't do that. But yet, our Christianity is saying we need to walk in this level of forgiveness. This if we're going to, what is Christianity? Is to follow Christ, and he's walking in a level of forgiving the entire human race for every offense. Now, I don't know about you, but that blows my mind. But so what are we not saying? We're not saying it's okay. We're not saying that you put yourself in a position again to be abused, or you don't safeguard yourself and those things. We're not saying you have to go talk to that person and have them in your life. No, don't misunderstand. We're not saying in that. What we're dealing with is internally the effect of unforgiveness in your heart, because it's not doing a thing to them. Well, it might be, but it's not really. The person who's really being destroyed by unforgiveness is me. I'm just dealing with me. In the teachings of Christ, he says, deal with the log in your eye. So we're always dealing with ourselves. We're always looking at ourselves and seeing, what is the effect to me? I wonder if I could just say this, Esther, about unforgiveness and a way of seeing it. If a man was in a car accident and his body is badly damaged, if he doesn't get an infection in those wounds, he will heal, or she will heal. Now, if a man gets a scratch, now before the days of antibiotics, he could get an infection that poisoned his blood and kill him. People had to be so careful of infections. So it's not the wound that kills us. but the infection. And I see unforgiveness as something that eats away our lives. Would you agree with that? It's worse than what's actually happened.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like we're saying, our heart locks up that person and that vent, thinking that in some way we can control it and punish them in some way internally, in a sense. I'm not sure I'm verbalizing that right, but actually,
Yeah,
the person who gets punished really is us. The person who's not free is us. The person who's being controlled is us through not forgiving. And actually, it was reminded me. I was just reminded of a quote from T.D. Jakes that says, I think the first step is to understand that forgiveness does not exonerate the perpetrator. Forgiveness liberates the victim. It's a gift you give yourself. And I thought that is so true in my life, that the opposite of what I think is happening. Actually, the purpose of forgiveness is for us. It's
yeah.
to liberate us.
It is so spot on, Esther. Jesus said, "Judge not." You see, always unrighteous judgment is always connected to unforgiveness. I don't forgive because I judge. And he says, when you judge, what happens is you get locked into the same measure of judgment. So, with anything that happens to us, we do one of three things. We either forgive it or we land up doing it. And you find that in Romans chapter 2, verse 1. You who judge do the same, and we see that in abuse, and a lot of people abused who have been abused become abusers. We see people who their parents left them, their dad walked out, they land up walking out on their kids. We see a lot of times when people judge, they get locked into the same judgment and they land up doing the same thing they judged the other person for. The third thing that can happen, if you're very strong, if you're strong, you won't do the same, but you will fight it your whole life. You become a vigilante. So anyone who abuses someone, rah, anyone who walks out on their kids, rah, whatever the judgment is that you carry, anyone that litters or whatever it is that you judge, if you don't do it, you get real mad. Can you relate to that, Esther?
No, not at all. No, I'm kidding. Because the trouble is, it's when we were talking about this in the week, and looking at what we were going to share this evening, and you were saying, "Have you forgiven your stepbrother?" And I was like, "Yes," and I've forgiven myself. And then you were like, "So how do you feel about, perpetrators of child abuse?" And it was like, don't ask me that, Roy, because I'm not wanting to look at that. I am a total vigilante in that area, and it's an anger. I want to wipe it out. I felt, very hard to forgive other people who hurt children, having experienced it myself. So yeah, I can totally identify with that.
So,
And I
but
would think to
let's,
say, oh, but I'm not a paedophile. That's what's happened to me isn't who I am. I'm not that at all. But actually you're right, because the opposite of that is true for me, that I have that element of wanting to hurt people who have hurt children.
yeah, you become locked up in that judgment, as Jesus said. So again, let's say what we're not saying. We're not saying it's okay. And I think what you're saying about wanting to wipe it out and so on, I mean, that's amen. That we want this eradicated. Um, but the thing that's happening is being locked up in the judgment affects your life, because now you're super highly charged about it. How does that affect you, Esther? What's on your journey here? What more needs to happen, do you feel?
Yeah, I'm smiling about that, but because it's an uncomfortable smile, because
Yeah.
actually, as I've shared with you before, Roy, actually the biggest fear that I have in my life is of somebody harming my daughter. I have a fear of paedophilia. I have a fear I experienced in my life being abused for several years by my stepbrother, but also from a complete stranger, being molested, have and attempted him to drag me to his car. It's been a part of my life, this awareness of predatory behavior, and I have a total fear of it. When I first had my daughter, from the time she was a tiny baby, this escalated in me. I always had a fear of it myself, often not being able to go out for a walk or not being able to go places on my own for fear of being harmed. But having my daughter, it's heightened it to the nth degree. I can remember when she was, it's a little bit better now, but it's still there. When my daughter was first born, and well, when she first went into sleeping in her own room when she was about 5 or 6 months old, I couldn't sleep with my back to the door. I had a video monitor and I had to wake myself up every few minutes just to make sure she was still there, because I have a terrifying fear of her being snatched, of something happening to her. But it's exhausting. It's an abnormal, irrational level of fear that somebody's going to harm her, and this need to protect her like nobody else can protect her, and yet feeling like I can't really protect her, but to ensure that nobody comes near her, and nothing bad can happen to her as it happened to me. And lockdown has suppressed that a little bit because nobody's coming near, we're not going anywhere, we're not out and about, and it masks it a little bit. But it is there, and it's quite controlling.
Yeah. So wherever we have fear, we have control. So the purpose of freedom is to cast fear out. Perfect love comes in and gets rid of fear. So anything in our life that controls us by fear is unhealthy. And so are you seeing, Esther, even on this journey, that there's more work, and it's related in this area to what this concept? And I think we're all going to I think all of us are going to struggle here, because I don't think there's a one person who will find this easy to forgive the world like Jesus did. This great gospel that we're preaching is offensive to a lot of us, because it's like, what do you mean, like, forgive everyone?
Mm.
Can you see a relation in this? Is it making more sense to you?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because going on this journey, it highlights things that maybe some things I was aware of, like I was aware that I struggle with fear with my daughter. Some things I wasn't really aware of this vigilante judgment in my heart. So for anyone watching, can we just reiterate, we haven't got this all sussed out, but we are, despite these things, living a life of purpose. But it's highlighting things as we go in our own, well, I don't know about you, Roy, but in my own life and
Yeah.
my own things that I'm still blocking out or not really wanting to look at. But the good thing is, knowing that these steps work, these techniques work, I'm more willing to look at them than I would have been before.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think also, as we're only coming with our stories and with our experiences, and you might not agree, and you're free to comment, and you're free to test what we're saying and give your point of view. We're not here, we're just trying to find our way here together. Esther, can I ask a little bit about the techniques now, like how the techniques have worked?
Yeah, the techniques have worked at different times in my life of kind of the things that we're talking about in techniques, which we will go through, are looking at the things that rise up in our heart, the things that rise up in our head, the fears, the memories or the anxieties, the effects of these things. It's looking at them when they pop up internally. I don't know how else to describe it. But not engaging with those things. So, an example for you is I can remember another time in my life I experienced someone really close to me rejecting me quite in quite a big way, and saying some things about me that really weren't true. And because it was someone very close to me, this I wanted to explain myself. I wanted to defend myself or justify myself. I wanted to be able to have a conversation with them and say, look, what you're saying about me or thinking about me isn't right. I wanted to put it right. I wanted to fix it, and they wouldn't allow that. So I was in real torment of, oh, but what about this, or they're saying this about me, and this fight that goes on with all these things, the battle against them. um and you showed me, actually, okay, well, why don't you just sit and look at these things, these thoughts that are popping up, the things that have been said. Just sit, and when these thoughts come, just look at them. Don't engage with them, don't fight them, don't defend, just look at them. And actually, in those moments when you look at these things, when the battle's been going on, if you just look at them and don't engage with them, actually they disperse. And another thing that you would often do with me when I was in the struggle with some of these things, we'd go through some of these steps, but also you would say, do you know what, Esther, right now, in this moment, you're okay. Because when you're actually, like you said, in the spirit and not looking or engaging so much with all the physical, mental, and emotional stuff that's going on, in this moment right now, we are okay. Isn't that right, Roy?
Yeah, fantastic. Let me say a few things here on the techniques, and maybe we could do a demonstration, Esther, do you think?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've always noticed in the scripture is it always seems to point to this guy who would come along and tell us some information. So you see, right in the Old Testament, it's like this prophet's going to come, and when he comes, listen to what he says. And then later on, you see, and then it begins to give descriptions where he would be born, how he would die, how he would live, and so on, like hundreds of little bits and bobs. And he comes along, and then he goes up to this mountain, and a voice comes from heaven, they say. And it says, "This is my beloved son, listen to him." And then he himself began to say these really profound things. And he says, these things will take you into the kingdom. Because all these religious people, they've been waiting to go in this kingdom. And they're like, where's this kingdom? And he goes, it's not out there. You won't see it out there. It's in here. And he taught them how to go within themselves. And then before he left, he told his disciples, he says, go and make other people that will follow me, follow my teachings, teach them everything I've said. Now, this is Jesus Christ, obviously. Now, I don't know hardly any Christians who teach what Jesus said. And none of us seem to do it either. And he said, it's not going to work unless you do it. He said, you'll be like a man who builds his house on sand. When the pandemic comes, your house is going to fall apart. But if you build your house on the teachings that I give you, the storm comes, the pandemic comes, you're going to stand. So all of the teachings of Christ pretty much do one of two things. They either bring you into the kingdom or into your true self, or they teach you how to remain in your true self. That's basically what they do. And the essence of all of this is in what's called the I am. So it's so interesting. In the Old Testament, you all watch the Ten Commandments. Moses turns up and he's at the burning bush, and he says, "Who shall I say?" You know, the burning bush says, "Go and set my people free." And he says, "Who shall I say sent me?" And he says, "I am that I am." So strange that the invisible God, creator, reveals himself as a tense. And then this man, this prophet that was to come, he comes along and he reveals himself as a tense. He says, "I am." He says, before Abraham was, "I am." They're all going to stone him because they knew what he meant. He's saying he's God, basically. And so he would say, "I am the way, the truth, the life," not big words, just little words that pointed us to go in. So the point I'm trying to make here is your salvation is now. It's not in the future. In your false self, we call it the carnate mind. We call it the carnal mind, the old Adam, and we've got loads of names in the Christian language. But probably the easiest way to understand it is the false ego, the false self. In your false self, you are only in one of two places. You're in the past with blame, shame, regret, hate, or you're in the future with fear. The full self never lives in this moment. That's why this is why forgiveness and getting freedom is so important. Because guys, you can live your whole life in your head, in your mind, in the false identity, because that's what it does. It tries to get you to identify with what's happened to you and define you and say that's who you are. And you live your whole life there. And now you're 80. And I've sat with them and they're still there, locked into a false identity. And it's always in the past, what's happened to me, or the fear of what will happen. So I'm saying you don't have to do that anymore. This is the message of Christ, that now is the day of salvation, that there is no condemnations now. I'm quoting scriptures, that now. So what I was showing Esther is how we could come into the I am of Christ. We can sit in our true self, in our spirit, and we can watch the false self, and we can watch what's happening in our mind, in the Bible calls it the carnal mind, and we can watch what's happening in our bodies, because the mind, the thoughts create feelings, and the feelings create thoughts, and it's circular. And by watching it from our spirit, we can create space, and we can see you are not your mind. You are not that person. You are not your feelings. And as you see that, look, right now I'm looking at my window. The fact I can see my window means I'm not my window. You can look at something, it's not you. And so what I did with Esther, I showed Esther, look, it's not you. It's something that's happened to you. And by watching it, you saw a tremendous power, didn't you?
Yeah.
What would happen?
I think what you're expecting to happen isn't what happens. But in that moment, when you look at it and you watch it, you can see actually that it disperses. I don't know how to describe it really. It's really hard to describe, but it disperses. Yeah, it loses its power. It goes away.
And Esther, one of the people that really pointed me to go back to my own scriptures is a guy called Eckhart Tolle. He wrote this little book called The Power of Now. Now, there was a lot of things I didn't really agree with him, but my old teacher, he always taught us, eat the meat, leave the bones. And so Eckhart Tolle taught us Christians, go back to your Bible, Go back to the teachings of Christ. And I always knew from a child that was the right thing, but he really hit that home and helped me really see the difference between spirit and flesh, and my true identity and false identity, and being in the I am, all by going back to the teachings of Christ. And then later on, I went back to the Old Testament teachings and found loads there, but it will take too long to explain it all. But maybe if the time is now, we should demonstrate it with everybody.
Yeah, definitely. That would be good, Roy.
Okay. So what we're going to do, and is simply this, is I want you to ask yourself this question, everybody, okay? And I want you to do it as well, Esther. I wonder what my next thought is going to be. I wonder what my next thought is going to be. And when you ask that question, I just want you to wait for when it comes. I wonder what my next thought's going to be. And then when it comes, I want you to interrupt me.
Yeah.
You got a next thought. So what was your thought, Esther? Can you share it?
I wonder if my daughter's going to start screaming.
Okay. So then now I want you to say, I wonder what my next thought's going to be. And wait again.
Yeah.
What was your next thought?
Is my husband coping?
Okay. And then I want you to say, I wonder what my next thought's going to be. And I want you to breathe deeply into your stomach.
Yeah.
What was your next thought?
It's along the same lines.
Yeah.
It's the apprehension of what's happening upstairs, if they're managing okay.
Okay. So I wonder what my next thought's going to be, and breathe. And breathe deeply into your stomach.
Yeah, already it's eased.
Yeah. So what we're doing there, we're creating space. So this is what the Bible talks about. Jesus talks about taking every thought captive. So every thought, what we did is we captured it, and you can't capture your thought by thinking, okay, I need to take every thought captive. I need to stop thinking. I need to stop thinking about that. Oh, stop thinking, and suppress it and stop it. You can't stop thoughts. So we weren't trying to stop you from thinking them things. What we was doing is getting you to watch it and then not engage. So you didn't engage with those thoughts. They were worries, concerns. We just said, okay, now let it go. So you let it come, like someone coming riding a bike towards you. I think these are the words of Eckhart Tolle, and then going off. And then the more you slow your mind down, and some people who are doing this for the first time, Esther, they may have rapid thoughts.
Yeah.
Did you remember that? So this
Yeah.
is a method. So if you do this regularly, what will happen is it will slow everything down and bring you into this moment. So just for a moment there, could you see we were just now in the I am.
Yeah.
In the I am, when you're just that, the Bible says they that, if you keep your, they that keep, how do I quote it? He will keep you in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed. That means it stopped going forward.
Yeah.
And because they trust him, that bit, that's the original quote. He will keep you. If you look at the original Hebrew, it says this: he will keep you in perfect peace, whose mind isn't going forward. It's just stopping there because they trust in him.
Yeah.
Okay, so the mind It's connected to the body. One is a mental thought, one is a physical feeling. It's the same. It's the same. So just do this now. And I hope everyone's doing this with us. I'm demonstrating here. So I want you to say, I want you to do two things now. I want you to watch your thoughts, Esther, and I want you to ask yourself this question. What am I feeling right now in my body? And then I want you to breathe deeply into your stomach. And I want you to tell me where the most intense feeling is.
In my shoulders.
Okay. And what does that feel like?
Tension.
Okay. You
Strong
feel like
ache.
tightness.
Yeah.
So I just want you to just watch it for a bit. Just watch with your spirit. So what we're doing is we're sitting in our spirit and we're watching what's happening in our body. So some of you, while you're watching it, Esther, let me explain. Some of you might, if you've never done this before, you might have a lot of tension or anxiety in your chest area. Some people have a tightness or anxiety in their stomach area. Some even have it in their throat. That's quite common, that sort of area. And I want you to breathe. And it might get quite intense, but just know this, you're not going to die. What is happening to you is just trauma in your body. And by watching it, you'll see that it can't hurt you. That's the first step. Don't try and make it leave. All I want you to do is watch it. You can't make it go. That's what makes it stay, by you giving it energy. All you can do is sit in your spirit and know whatever's happening in my body right now, whatever's kicking off, that I'm okay. I'm okay in this moment. And breathe deeply, because when you breathe deeply, it tells your brain you're not in danger. Because when you're in danger, you shallow breathe. See, that's what increases panic. So breathe into your belly and just allow yourself to feel what's happening in your body. And just watch with intense, like an intense look from your spirit at what's happening. So Esther, really just look at those shoulder areas, that tension. And then because it's also a muscular, I just want you, Esther, just to do a couple of little head stretches like that. People are probably cracking up right now, but this stuff works while you're watching. And just keep looking, even on the stretch. Okay. Keep looking there as you're doing them. And then I'd be interested to see some of the comments of you that are really watching in these areas of the chest and different parts of your body, whether it's dissipating, whether it's increasing. Can you remember doing those before, Esther, when it was really intense all in your neck and your chest? Do you remember what that was like?
Yeah, I would feel like when you look at it, it's like, oh, actually such a tightness across my throat, tightness in my chest, stomach, the places that you mentioned. And just looking at it, breathing deeply, it would, like you said, just dissipate and dissolve. Not, but if you try and focus on it and, oh, it's not happening yet,
Yeah.
then it increases. So you just keep breathing, just look at it, think about that place in your body, watch it, and it dissolves.
Don't try and make it go. That's the key, because that's where it gets its strength from.
Yeah.
It gets its energy from you. So when you just sit in your spirit and watch it and think, I'm okay. This is just something happening in my body. Eventually, it dissipates. If it doesn't matter. It's not going to kill you. It can't affect you. It's not you. That's the thing we're doing. We're saying no longer is this what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking about myself, my identity anymore. I am safe. I am one with God. I am perfected. I'm sealed in God. I'm fine. I'm a new creation. This bit is sealed and it's okay. How's your shoulder and stuff, Esther? Is it still the same or is it
No,
different?
yeah, it's looser, it's freer, the pain is reduced.
Yeah.
And I think what's so powerful about this is to do it regularly as well. I do it now in the morning when I wake up and in the evening when I go to bed, when I remember. But also if I'm particularly stressed, if I'm having a really busy day, because stress is fear, that anxiety, and I'm more aware of it now. So it helps with the really big things, but also just in your day to day of like, what, I'm just looking at it. I'm feeling anxious. Let's just look at that.
Mm.
Just look at it and sit with it. I'm going to pick up on some of the comments, Roy.
Yeah.
Beverly saying, so amazing. Breathing and practicing being in my body in the present moment have really helped me. And just letting the emotion or thought come and then go. And just noticing them and saying things like, oh, that was a worry. Just a non-judgmental comment. And then it passes.
Yeah.
Vagus nerve calming techniques like breathing and cold shower and exercise is also amazing. That's really true. That's
Who
really
said
good. And
that, Esther? Is
that
that
was
yeah, all of that's really important.
yeah.
Because we forget we're human as well as spirit. And what we've often done in trying to get rid of the carnal, we've killed the human at the same time. But when we watch, the Bible says, watch and pray. So I just showed you the first part. I just showed you how to watch from your spirit. But the second part is very powerful also, because when you watch and you're at complete peace, you can see what is your spirit, what does your spirit want to say to that?
Mm.
And sometimes your spirit doesn't need to say anything, just the presence of your spirit will dissolve it. But every now and then, your spirit will say something as well. And it might just say a thank you to God, or it might speak life into the death that's in that part of your life, if you like. But is there more comments you wanted to read? Sorry for interrupting.
Just say that again, Roy. I think that's really powerful. It might speak life to the death
Yeah.
that's happened in your heart.
Yeah.
Is
Let
that
me explain it by the scriptures. It says, when we sow into the carne, so that's the mind, the carnal mind, what we've been talking about. So when we identify with it, when we think it's us, we sow into it, we invest into it, we reap what's called corruption. It means it's death. It comes from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's its source. It's information. It lives off information. It lives off judgments. It lives off this is good, this is bad, this is what's happened, and it's never ending. So what happens is when I no longer identify with that and I create a distance, the damage that's caused in my humanness, that could be my emotions, that could be my nervous system, that could be my brain, that could be my body, even in the muscles here, your muscles, sometimes people's jaws are clicking because of stress and different things like that. And even deeper areas of our hearts, the emotional realm and stuff like that. What you'll find is you can go into the second part of watching. These are scriptures, Esther, to watch and now to pray. And it tells you why you do that as well. It explains it in the Bible. But so what happens is your spirit, because your spirit's life, you're now eating. When you sit in your spirit, you're now eating from the tree of life. Your resource is God. If you look back behind you, you're totally one with God. So it's unlimited resources flowing into your body. So tremendous. So the word, so here's where we get what's called the preceding word. The words that proceed from the mouth of God. Man shall not live. Remember when Jesus was fighting the devil, he said, man shall not live by bread alone, but every word that proceedeth. That's a now word. That's what it means. The rhema is now for this situation. Now, the preceding word is creative. It's a seed. And you'll see that in the scriptures about the sower and so on. I can't explain it all now, but basically it's a creative seed. It's always creative, and it goes into that area and it recreates. It recreates that which was dead. It now breathes and brings and reproduces life. So sometimes you'll find that's when, Esther, you talked about repeating scriptures. That's when it's very powerful. But the difference is it's proceeding. It's not just like what we call logos, a load of words that we're just constantly saying. We're searching, we're allowing the mind of Christ and the Spirit to give us a word. And now we begin to see it and speak it and be it and produce it and bring forth a whole new. So my true identity now flows into that dead area. I hope I answered your question. It sounds so complex listening to myself.
That's a lot. That's a lot right there, folks, isn't it? But that's some really good stuff. Watch it back and let those words just seep into you, because I think there's some really important stuff there. And I'm really sad to say that we've run out of time. But before we go, who's been watching and doing this? Let us know. Have you tried this evening? Have you been doing it with us? How are you feeling right now? What effects have come out of these little techniques that we've done this evening? Nicola says this is really good. Thank you, Nikki. Has anybody else been trying this with us tonight? I would like to encourage you to try it again, to go there, look at these things. And we're actually going to expand on this again next week, because it was too much to fit into 1 week. So we're going to be back next week. And actually, we're going to have your friend Roy with us, Mark Becking, who is a psychotherapist. And he's going to be sharing with us a bit more about these techniques and why they work. Isn't that right, Roy?
Yeah. He's a Christian psychotherapist, if I could say that as well.
Yeah, and we're really excited to hear his perspective and his experiences of this. And we'd love to hear back from you. If you go away and you try these things in the coming week, let us know how you're getting on with it. Let us know how you find it practically, but also what effects it's had in your body, in your day, in your heart. We would love to know. So let us know your thoughts, and we will be picking up on this how to turn a toxic past into a purposeful now next week. And we will look forward to seeing you then on Thursday at 7:30 for Trust Talks.
Thank you for watching Trust Talks by the Purim Trust. To find out more about the work that we do supporting vulnerable women and children, you can go to thepurimtrust.org and get involved with building hope in the lives of those who need it.